Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Dreary Midnight Podcast. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm going to tell you an urban legend. I'm going to tell you the version that I heard growing up.
Okay.
In the 6th grade.
I love urban legends.
So, the version I learned is there's a girl who had just gotten her driver's license, and her starter vehicle is kind of an old truck. She's excited because she's like 17, and having a car is, a big deal. So she's driving home late one night. Another vehicle comes up behind her. The person behind her starts flashing their high beams at her. And the girl checks her own headlights. Her own lights are on. It's a pretty fine road, so she doesn't need the high beams. At a weird interval later, the person behind her flashes their high beams at her again. She's like, what's the deal? So she drives pretty cautiously. She gets ready to pull over or into a gas station or something, because clearly this person doesn't realize that going around is an option. The other person flashes their high beams a third time, and she pulls in and she calls home. The other driver pulls over as well, and this girl with her dad, the state trooper, on the phone is like, what is your deal? And the other driver says, sorry to freak you out. I was trying to alert you to the guy with a knife in the back of your truck bed. I flashed my high beams to highlight when he was about to stand up and stab you.
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
So tonight on Dreary Midnight, we're going to talk about the history of this urban legend. Let's get into it.
When you mean history, do you mean it happened?
So, yes and no.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned in the last episode, we're both moving, and so this one's going to be kind of a shorter episode because
our brains are scattered.
Yeah, brains are all over the place. What is a solid brain? I don't know. But
so this urban legend, I've heard it. I've had many iterations of it.
yeah.
There is a version where she doesn't make it, but then that kind of takes away from the urban legend thing because
Yeah.
the whole point is that you're supposed to have somebody who
survived
survives.
and perpetrated a little bit more.
But the version that I heard, she pulls into a gas station and gets out of the car to go into the gas station so that she's safe. And that's when the guy is comes in and is like, hey, I was trying to tell you. So so instead of being on the phone with her dad, she's in the gas station.
Yeah. So the core elements are it's a solo driver and someone comes up behind her. Killers in the Backseat is literally the title of the urban legend. It's also called high beams sometimes. And the other element is that there's always another person to bear witness. So her dad, the state trooper on the phone.
Gas station employee
yeah.
or whatever.
There was one I saw where the gas station employee, she goes in to prepay and then she goes back out, and then the gas station employee comes over the PA or whatever and it's like, can you come back in for a second? I need to double check this thing. And so that's not necessarily the person with the high beams, but still that extra layer of witness.
Yeah, I think that in that version, the high beams person keeps driving, right?
I think so.
They don't pull over.
Yeah.
So then it's somebody else.
Yeah.
Because the whole point is that you think that the high beams are the danger. So as soon as she gets away from them,
yeah,
you're like, oh, she's safe.
Yeah.
Turns out they weren't the danger.
I've also seen a lot of iterations where she's driving a sedan or something and it's a person in the truck who's behind her. And I drive a Camry and I can tell you that anyone's regular headlights shine right into my rear view window. It is, I think, kind of a danger hazard at this point.
I watched a whole Drew Gooden video about how cars are getting bigger and bigger, and it's actually becoming, while it's safer for the cars that are bigger, it's less safe for the cars that are small.
Have not had
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's I can't see anything.
Yeah.
Because you're blinding me right now.
Yeah, so it's that combination of the LED and then you put on the high beams. I cannot look in my rear view mirror if there's a truck behind me with LEDs on. So get it together, truck manufacturers.
Yeah, seriously. I understand the need for LEDs if you're in the mountains or something, but my God, you don't have to just use them when you're driving down a side street or
Yeah.
like driving down a
Yeah.
well-lit highway.
Yeah. So there are a couple kind of elements that are similar, or elements that have been reported in like the friend of a friend situation.
That's how urban legends happen,
Yeah.
though, right?
Yeah, I didn't do it, but my friend's cousin's friend's potato did it.
That's how the whole element of, like, I think every town has a train track where someone got hit.
And
And the
consequently
ghost
still haunts
hands
it.
will,
Yeah.
like, haunt it, exactly.
Or like somebody's still trying to cross or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I went to college in a train town, and the local like tragic story about the train tracks there was like a professor died on the train tracks, and I was like, what? And the professor who told me about it was like, yeah, he was deaf, and the train was early. And he had memorized the schedule, so he thought he was fine.
Why was he on the tracks?
Well, you can't get onto campus without getting
Through the tracks?
especially from the residential area. Most of campus is on one side of the tracks, but then you can't get to like the off-campus coffee shop or things like that without going over the tracks.
The urban legend that I grew up with was there was like train tracks and a bus full of kids that got hit.
Yeah.
So now if you put your car and you like park it on the train tracks, you'll feel little ghost hands like pushing your car.
Yeah.
But I heard that legend when I was a kid, but then obviously like so many towns have that same exact legend to the point where it was literally on Mythbusters, I think.
Yeah.
But this one.
Yeah. So this one of the older, also apologies for any potential background noise. Again, new moving and new fridge
New apartment
noises.
noises.
Yeah. So one of the older iterations, or at least news articles about the iterations, was from Deseret News on December 13th, 1991.
Was it a Friday?
I don't know. It was published, by Deseret News and Jen Harold Brunavand. And it's titled, Tales of Backseat Killer is Similar to News Stories. And which, it says, quote, which weird stories are just legends and which ones are real? That's a difficult question to answer.
It was a Friday.
I love it. Which weird stories are just legends and which ones are real? That's a difficult question to answer, especially in the case of The Killer in the Back Seat, one of the most popular American urban legends. Classic versions of the stories, which have circulated for some 30 years, describe the woman driving home alone at night who is followed closely by a stranger driving a truck. The truck pursues her right off the highway and to her home, occasionally flashing his high beams. As soon as she's in her own driveway, the terrified woman leans on the horn to summon her husband. At that point, the pursuing driver jumps out of his truck and runs up to her car. He jerks the rear door open, pulls out a man who is lurking in the backseat with a knife.
Ooh, that's a heroic version.
Yeah. Which, the wild part about this one is, again, this was published in 91, and it said classic versions have circulated for 30 years. So this dates back at least to the 60s.
Like as soon as cars were just like a mainstream thing.
And furthermore, as soon as women are allowed to have their own cars, bank accounts to buy said cars, driver's license and IDs to operate said cars. The Killer in the Backseat, Deseret News goes on, is told with countless variations, such as why the woman is out driving alone at night, and in some versions the woman is rescued by a service station attendant who, while he's filling the tank, notices a man hiding in the back seat. He calmly asks the woman. I mean, except in New Jersey. It's illegal to pump your own gas in New Jersey.
Oregon had that for a while, and then they just changed it, so now you can pump your own gas.
But in any case, this goes on to say it's always the person supposedly involved in the incident is always merely a friend of a friend. A New Jersey college student who wrote to me recently heard another version from her mother. This time, when the police came, drew their guns, and ordered the man to get out, he turned out to be the woman's boyfriend. He had a bouquet of roses and an engagement ring and was waiting to surprise her, but not quite the way things turned out.
Don't surprise her like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if pranking each other like that is necessarily a core tenet of the relationship, but maybe it shouldn't be.
If you're going to be doing that, like, don't do it while she's driving, because that's just gonna make her crash. Like, whether or not it's a cute intention, it's going to make her swerve and be like, crash off the road.
But so that was from Deseret News. And so that's kind of an origin, or not like an origin, but one of the earlier tales of it. Another early record was from the Journal of Indiana Folklore from 1968. So we're getting into the 60s. And so this one says, quote, "There was once a high school girl who lived in a suburb of Ogden, Utah. And on the opening night of a school play, in which she had a main part, her parents were fated suddenly with a mild illness, forcing her to drive to school alone at night. This she did, and the production was a success. When starting her journey home, she noticed that some man had parked directly behind her and started his motor up about the same time that she'd started hers up. This didn't bother her because many people were leaving at the same time. On the highway, she glanced through the side view mirror, her rear view was broken or something, and saw that same car. This time, it did occur to her that perhaps she was being followed. However, she still had to turn off on a vacated country road, and she felt sure that surely he wouldn't be going in that direction because hardly anyone knew about this shortcut, and that if he did turn on it also, then she would be certain that she was being followed. Her suspicions were strengthened as the trailing automobile crept up behind her and also turned off onto the road. She was just frantic and kept driving at a very high, increasingly dangerous speed. But then again, so did he. All of a sudden, for no reason at all, she felt this blinding light hitting her in the face, and she realized that he had just turned on his brights. She was tempted to believe that this was just a temporary thing, but after they had been off a while, here goes, they came back on again, bright as ever. As the story goes, he kept turning his brights on and off at a strangely unexplainable intervals, very rapidly, just quick enough to startle her for a moment, leaving her petrified. Finally, she reached her driveway, and sure enough, he pulled in right after her, turned off his motor, but left his bright lights on. She dashed into her house, told her parents, who in turn telephoned the police. When the police arrived, the car was still in the driveway with the brights on. The cops went up to the car and tried to arrest the man, but he just resisted the arrest by saying, "I'm sorry, I'm not the man you want." Then he pointed to the car that the girl was driving and said, "I believe the one you're looking for is up in there." And for sure enough, in the back seat of the car the girl had been driving, a small man was crouched down. As the first man later explained, this tiny man would creep up on the girl driving the car and would attempt to strangle her. But at this time, the first man, who had seen the tiny guy slip into the car at the schoolyard, but who didn't have time to alert the girl, would blink on his brights and the stranger would dart back down to a seat. Thus, the tiny man was arrested, and the girl, as well as the kids going to Mary Lee's high school, learned to lock their car doors and to look in the back seat of the cars before entering.
Jesus. Yeah. I like how detailed that one is.
It mentions Mary Lee's high school, and it says, told by Aaron Buckner, who heard it from Mary Lee Mement of Ogden, Utah. So again, a friend of a friend. So Mary Lee's high school is like, yeah, Aaron's friend Mary Lee.
Is there any actual record, do you know, of that happening?
Celeste's dog Clem is also about and is demanding scritches. Yes. So also if you hear barking,
it just means somebody in the hallway or is walking.
Or a gnat farting in Kentucky or something like that. Also, I don't think I actually said this, R.I.P. to Jerry Polly from Hillbilly Horror Stories, who I got that from. But he was kind of like a bastion in the community. And yeah, so R.I.P.
Oh.
Yeah. The Killer in the Backseat from Snopes, so like the fact-checking, legend-checking website.
Snopes. I love Snopes. I've spent Snopes so many hours on Snopes when I was in college.
Same. So Snopes has it as eventually turning into a creepypasta and making the rounds as like an email creepypasta. But, of course, subbing in local roads or local exits. And it mentions all of the variations. Snopes says, this legend, unlike many, might originally have been prompted by a real news story.
Oh.
that research shows that one true case of the killer in the backseat did occur in 1964 in New York City, when an escaped murderer hid in the backseat of the car.
That sounds like an urban legend.
The car ironically belonged to a police detective who shot the man.
Oh.
Though the differences between the legend and the true occurrences are vast, the real occurrence did not feature a lone female. It didn't necessarily happen at night, and no third person was involved. The legend may have sprung out of this real incident.
He didn't go into a police car, right? He just went into a car that happened to be... Because that would be the stupidest thing ever. If you are a criminal who's on the run and then you just see, this is a free car and it's literally a police car.
Yeah, it had to be like an undercover car or something.
Yeah, or just like his personal car. Okay, and you said that it had been originating for about 30 years and that was in the 90s. So that makes sense with the timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I noticed, especially for like the 60s and 70s, is that like you had to trust on word of mouth so much more. Like nowadays we have Snopes, and Snopes is like one of the longest articles I pulled up for this. But
it's a very popular urban legend. But
it's like just common enough to be a cautionary tale because people in the US drive all the time. Yeah. Like it's not much of an urban legend outside of the US.
But everybody has a car. You have to have a car to get anywhere. Unless you're in a major city that has a good public transport.
Yeah.
If you're in any of the outlying or like interstates, you need a car.
But I gotta mention it's a short episode. That's all I have for you today. Have you heard any iteration of this, dear listeners? Send us an email, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. You look like you're about to say something.
I was going to say something and I totally forgot, but it had to do with urban legends. But I don't remember. So maybe we'll do another urban legends episode when I do remember.
All right. All right. So if there's an urban legend, dear listener, that you want us to cover, shoot us an email, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/drearymidnight. Follow us on Instagram at drearymidnightpod.
Yeah.
And with all of that said, just check your backseat before you start driving.
That's what I was going to say. I always do that because of that urban legend. I always, before I get into the car, I always check.
Yeah.
Because it's scary. So do that.
But like generally as a safety thing, check your backseat. Check your wheels too. As like a safety measure.
Yeah. And try to park in populated areas and well-lit areas.
Yeah.
And lock your cars.
Lock your car all the time. Like, who are you not locking your car in the parking lot?
Even if you're just going to go in for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
To get like gas, come like lock it.
Yeah.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. And with all that said, safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.